And that transitions to me again. So
it does
do that. We're talking about Lucinda Williams, self-titled Lucinda Williams. In the opening montage, you're going to hear Passionate Kisses, and now you're going to hear Change the Locks.
I changed the lock on my front door so you can't see me anymore, and you can't come inside my house, and you can't lie down on my couch. I changed the lock on my front door.
All right, Matt, what are the stats on this album?
Yep, so Lucinda Williams' self-titled album from 1988 comes in at number 534 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 46 in 1988, number 3,504 of all time. It's Lucinda Williams' second highest rated album behind 1998's Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, an album I believe which we will cover in the next decade. And it did make Rolling Stone's list, and one of the two albums tonight that did, coming in at number 426. And Lucinda Williams is ranked as the number 456th best overall artist on Best Ever Albums rankings.
Okay. Well, I think I looked at your sheet, John. I think we're doing it as a cold listen maybe for
Correct.
her.
Yep.
So I've got kind of a overall bio through that album. I tried to condense it, obviously. There are some interesting coincidences of the week that this is this episode is being released with what's going on in her life, so I'll get to those in a bit. But she was born in Lake Charles, Louisiana in 1953. She started performing in her early 20s around the Houston and Austin areas of Texas before she moved to Jackson, Mississippi in 1978 to record her first album for Folkways Records. It was released in 1979 entitled Ramblin' on My Mind. It was essentially a collection of country and blues covers, no original material. Folkways Records was actually acquired by the Smithsonian in 1987, so it's now known as Smithsonian Folkways, and they still put out music. Her second album came out in 1980 and is titled Happy Woman Blues. It consists of original material and is described as being more rock-oriented than her first album. She then moved to LA in the 80s, where she was performing with a backing band, but also sometimes acoustic solo. And while she was there, she started gaining more of a following and getting more critical praise. And then eventually she moved to Nashville. In 1988, she put out this album titled Lucinda Williams. It was released by Rough Trade Records in England. Who else is on Rough Trade Records that we have talked about? Do you guys recall?
Lots of punk bands.
Yes, and the Smiths primarily.
That's true. Yep.
This is recorded at Mad Dog Studios in LA and was produced by herself, some guy named Gurf Morlix, which is a hilarious name, and Dusty Wakeman. She was having trouble getting traction while shopping the demo of the album around before all this happened. She said that the LA people said it's too country for rock, and the Nashville people said it's too rock for country. So then Rough Trade founder Jeff Travis signed her in 1987 and said, "We were big fans of the Southern literary tradition. We recognized that Lucinda was writing serious songs, but with the wit and humor of real rock and roll," which I agree on that. This album has been labeled as alternative country, roots rock, Americana, blues, country blues, etc., etc. Pretty much every genre that crosses those lines. You may recognize the song Passionate Kisses on this album. It was the fourth single. It was later covered by Mary Chapin Carpenter for her 1992 album, Come On, Come On, which I remember my mom having and listening to a lot. Mary Chapin Carpenter earned Best Female Country Vocal Grammy in 1994 for that album, which in turn netted Williams Best Country Song the same year for Passionate Kisses. So she has a Grammy. And, after this, she is multi-Grammy winner, multi-award winner, Lucinda Williams. This album received positive reviews when it was released. It was rated the 16th best album in the Village Voice Paz and Jop annual poll of critics, Robert Christgau gave it an A minus. And then I have some interesting postscript stuff and kind of the follow-up to her career after that. So this is fairly early on. This is kind of her, not her breakthrough, but I think her kind of most prominent. Car Wheels on a Gravel Road's kind of her breakthrough album later on, but this is the one that kind of, got her established, I would say. So I think I got Car Wheels on a Gravel Road from Matt at one point and burned that. And so it was fun going back to listen to this. I had not heard of this album before. What did you guys think of her self-titled album?
I'll give you first take, Matt, and I'll go second.
Okay, yes, I am familiar with Lucinda Williams. Not familiar with this record, though. And Car Wheels on the Gravel Road is probably the only real Lucinda album that I know. Mm-hmm. So I was excited to delve into this record. I love that description of too country for rock, too rock for country, which if you can manage that, balance that tightrope walk, I'm gonna love it, because this is right in my wheelhouse. This is stuff
a real
that
sweet spot for you. I think.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it wasn't something that I always like. This was something that it took some time for the alternative country, roots rock, Americana genre to really seep into my veins. It was something that I think I first was hearing bands like Sun Volt, Uncle Tupelo, early Wilco, Steve Earle, and to a lesser extent someone like Lucinda Williams. It was right around that time, the mid late 90s, that I started getting into this stuff. So I love this stuff. It's a very simple type of music. I mean, it's roots rock, right? So there's a lot of going back to the traditions of not just country music, but there's blues, there's certainly rock and roll. In some cases, there can be like a gospel type element to it as well. Mm-hmm. Old folk, traditional, American, traditional American music that goes way, way back, even, super far before even music was recorded. So this album is very solid throughout. I love Lucinda Williams' voice, and I love how she mixes both the up-tempo, more rock and blues songs with the slower ballads, and the melancholy, and there's a lot of heartache, a lot of love lost, kind of sad bastard music in here, from time to time. But there's pop, right? There's pop elements. There's some jangle guitar, and I love I assume it's Gurf Morlix is the, I think I have heard of that guy. I assume he's the guy. There's a lot of harmony, like male harmony behind Lucinda Williams' voice. Yep. And I assume that's him doing that, but he's pretty much slathered all over this record as well, and I think that they sound really good together. I don't know if I don't recall that being as prominent a feature on Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, but it's been a while since I've listened to that record. So
he plays like every different instrument that you can think of on here.
Yeah,
so pedal steel, lap steel, dobro.
There always seems to, that's the other thing with this genre. There always seems to be like somebody that's hanging on that just is the jack of all trades. It's,
right.
it's not the main singer or songwriter, but it's the one that can just put anything in front of me and I can play it. And so so I guess he's filling that role here. But I knew "Change the Locks." Actually, Tom Petty, I believe, covered that song. Correct. On the "She's the One" soundtrack. That's how I knew that. That's the song I was most familiar with, because I do have that Tom Petty record. But just great stuff, man. Like, and this is where I like my music simple. And now that I like this stuff, there's something it's a very comforting sound for me. And I think that maybe, to me, this is a genre that I think a lot of people could like, but there's certainly a country element. And I think for me, before I started getting into this, that was kind of a deal breaker initially. Anytime I would hear a slide guitar or something like that, or the fiddle, and I was like, man, this is country, turn it off. I was like that. But it didn't take too long for me to start to see how good that stuff was. And I really love that. So I love more of the hoedown, shit kicking music part of this. The fiddle. There's some fiddle in here. Yep. And just great songwriting. And like I said, her voice is. She's got a quasi distinct voice, like it's Lucinda Williams when you hear it. And I can both see how this was a a somewhat of a breakthrough album for her and a popular record, but I can also see how it's not something that sold a ton, as this genre typically does not. This is not something that's going to, top tons of charts and, sell out arenas and stuff like that, which is one of the things I like about this, liking a artist like this, is I can go see them in small clubs, usually for like $20, and experience an amazing show that, quite frankly, is better than a lot of the huge arena shows that you go to see that are at least I am. I don't spend hundreds of dollars to be wet right up front. I'll take the nosebleed seats and whatever. But yeah, I love the mixture of all the different elements of this, and it's I don't think we've really. Maybe this is the first alt country record we've covered. I know that we did like the Byrds had some of this, right? So did the Graham Parsons, the Flying Burrito Brothers, that stuff. But it's been some time since we really did something. I mean, we did more country like Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn. Obviously, last week we did Katie Lang, which is a very different type of country.
Right.
But this is I'm gonna pull this out way more than I would something like a Katie Lang. Katie Lang was great. I really liked listening to that. But this is just throwing those elements of the blues and rock and and just makes it all just a really great genre. So yeah, thumbs up for me. It's a great album.
Yep.
Yeah, Lucinda Williams is one of those artists that I just don't know why I haven't engaged with her material before. It's not out of a lack of desire to want to hear it. It's just sometimes just stuff becomes your, in your blind spots, right?
Yep.
And I would say this falls sort of in that for me. Pretty much everything Matt said would be things that I would agree with in terms of the sonic tenor of this album. I wanted to mention a couple things you didn't mention, Matt, without stepping on Josh's toes too much. One is I really appreciate the type of love songs that Lucinda Williams writes. It's like sort of like a I've worn down 15 cigarettes, weary love song that is both profound but not schlocky, which is my favorite type, where like it evokes the feeling but not in a way that seems canned. It seems it's that interesting thing where it seems universal but also very specific to her, but because you can see similarities in your relationships, right? It seems that you're connecting even if you can't totally understand it, if that makes sense. Matt mentioned her voice being very appealing, which I agree with. It's weary but also vibrant. Once again, which it really adds to the general vibe of her songs, because it kind of weathers both, right? The excitement, down to sort of the challenge of these relationships, and that's pretty much the theme of these songs, is sort of love songs with especially a lyrical content of, it's difficult for me to be in this because you need so much and I'm kind of an independent soul, right? Like it's sort of the protagonist in many of these, with a little bit of that unique type of feminism that I think you'd see later, that either came before her, right, with some of the country singers and that we've talked about, right? If we go with the lineage of the female country singers, we can find a little bit of sonically what people like Loretta Lynn were doing. Roseanne Cash, right, is another one that came to mind. And certainly later, if we're going like the 90s, there's elements of the Sheryl Crow vibe in this. And then certainly later sonically, I'd say Neko Case jumps out immediately as someone who sounds like a Gillian Welch, right? I think is another person that comes to mind. But to me, Matt, you went to obviously the Flying Burrito Brothers, Sweetheart of the Rodeo, Byrds, Graham Parsons Lane, which is absolutely true. But I'll also go into sort of that Neil Young, Townes Van Zandt, like singer-songwriters that we've done, that have at times elements of the pedal steel they can build in, or the plain telling. I mean, and the godfather of all of that, right, is the Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan lineage, right, that is in there. But I think she's very much of that lineage. I heard a lot of Neil Young in this album. If you just made the Neil Young lane more traditionally Americana, pedal steely, alt country, whatever you want to use shorthand for it. But in terms of the types of songs she's writing, I thought they were very much like a Neil Young song, mixed with the country tradition, and later being, I think, more definitively defined by. I've always actually, in many ways, been drawn more to female alt country musicians than male. I don't know what it is. There's just something about the tale as told by a woman that sort of appeals to me. I always feel like it has a little bit more humor, whereas the male side of it is a little bit more played straight, in my opinion. You said sad bastard music, Matt. Like, there's something about, for whatever reason, when a woman sings those types of songs that doesn't seem quite as melancholy. There's always a little bit of humor or, like realization, I guess, which I think just resonates with me lyrically, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that something that you guys feel? I feel like alt country, when coming from a female, I always find has a little bit more nuance to it, whereas with, on the man side, it's like a sad song telling a sad idea, right? And that isn't just, by the way, this genre, right? That goes into like indie rock too. I feel like there's a lot of very serious people telling you very serious, deep thoughts that come, especially in the 2000s, right? With your, Bon Iver, and, Sufjan Stevens and stuff, very serious people telling very serious tales. Whereas, I don't know. I just always.
I mean, you could all. Yeah, maybe. I don't know if I think about it that deeply, but I mean, I can think of like, someone like a Todd Snyder or Robbie Fulks who are very.
See, maybe I'm not as familiar. I'm not as familiar with either of those.
Yeah,
artists, so
I don't think we're covering.
Familiar.
Yeah, I don't think we're covering Todd Snyder, but his stuff is very funny. Like he's got really profound, like deep lyrics, and then he's got like extremely funny, witty, clever lyrics and stuff like that. So, and again, that you're kind of delving into an area that I don't really pay attention to a whole lot in music, but I can vouch that there are other male artists. It's not all like a super serious kind of a thing. I think so.
Well, and this music can cross over. By the way, you mentioned it's tough to. It's because as Sheryl Crow sold a zillion albums. Somebody like Melissa Etheridge, right, was sort of in this lane. I was thinking I was writing down like a bunch of people that
I think that artists like,
but they have to kind of make it more poppy. And I think Lucinda Williams.
Yeah, I think that's the difference there. I mean, Lucinda.
Yep.
Yeah, because she's definitely like
down is that she won't go in that lane. She'll delve into rock and country and a little bit of punk even at times, singer-songwriter tradition, but doesn't lean as heavy into that pop element as the
and I would say that probably something like a Melissa Etheridge or a Sheryl Crow occasionally go into this lane, like they can and they do it really well, but they're not. I would not call them alt country artists. You know what I mean? Like Lucinda Williams, there's the country sheen pretty much in every song. So, but I think that they are certainly influenced by someone like her. Just like I think if you're like a female singer songwriter, regardless of exactly what lane you're in, like with the genre or whatever, I think that it's traditionally a male dominated profession in terms of like singer songwriters and stuff.
2010s where you had Casey Musgraves and Brandi Carlile and all these different women. Right?
Well, they've expanded.
You can see as the lineage. Of
and they've certainly expanded. But like in the 80s, the time frame that we're in, when you have an artist like that, like a Kate Bush or like a Katie Lang, or a Sinead O'Connor. I mean, I think they were standing out in a time when there was even fewer female singer-songwriters. So I think invariably there's going to be some level of respect, for making it in that more male-dominated role. But you're right, John. It's definitely it's grown and it's much more. There's more artists to draw from these days, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and before I kick to Josh, I'll just say, it just as we get to the late 80s, you can really see how difficult a road it was with the origin stories of a lot of these female artists if they were not actively putting forth some sort of, I hate to put it this way, but really, like, unless you had some sort of sex appeal sizzle, right? Like, you kind of, in the 80s, you had to really fight hard. And I feel like we keep stumbling across female artists that we just like, how is this album not bigger than it was? It seems like it was tailor-made, and it would become a genre that 10 years later these people would sell tons of albums or at least have more of a thing. And it really is standing out to me. The 80s was not a super easy time if you were a female artist in many ways, unless you were a pop star and closely tied, right, to like
Yeah.
a beautiful image. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys on this album. This is kind of the type of country I like the most, just when it has like some sort of foundation in the past, but also kind of feels contemporary and looks to the future as well. I feel like this kind of straddles the line there. I also really like when country is kind of blues bound, which I think this is a lot. And so when those genres kind of crossover is when it works really well for me, versus kind of a more just like traditional country that's not gonna I'm not gonna respond as well to that, or as easily as I do to this. I think she does cross over quite a bit later in her career, and she's had many collaborations with different artists. And and appeared on other people's albums, and her live performances have been with a lot of different people. But what I like about her is, it's got this great rock vibe. She brings this kind of world weariness experience to her music, which comes through. I really like her lyrics. Something like Change the Locks is just a really good sing-along song, but also like really funny, like the extent to which she is trying to forget or get rid of this guy in her life. It's just kind of a perfect song for me in a lot of ways.
It's like empowering and desperate at the same time,
Yeah.
which is the hard lane to walk both.
Yeah, it's like
ways,
very
right?
exasperated. Like
Yes.
she's like, God damn it, I can't get rid of you, so I have to like
I'd rather
change
not,
towns and
but
change.
I'd rather also not change the locks. But I've
Yeah.
come to this conclusion, right, that we have to do this. So
Yep.
Yeah.
And she's also a good storyteller, I think, too. Something like the third song, Abandoned, is kind of, or not that song, the song before, The Night's Too Long, is kind of a story about a waitress, and it could be, that could be anybody. I don't think it's her, but she does a really good job of portraying like that person's experience and what they're going through. A lot of these songs just breeze by, and I find them really easy to sing along to. The opening song, I Just Wanted to See You So Bad, has kind of a repeating refrain or chorus or something that's really fun to sing along to. So it's just a really easy listen overall. I like, thanks to Gerf Morlix for incorporating violin and all the other instruments into the songs. I feel like that adds a nice element and breaks up the songs to make them sound really different. I can totally see why Passionate Kisses became a song that was covered and maybe more well known by other artists. And
it sounds like an REM song, kind of, doesn't it?
Yeah,
That's what I thought when I wrote.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a jangle indie rock, pop thing going on there.
yeah, and it's a classic like I want song. Like I want all these. I want a better life, and I want Passionate Kisses as well, as kind of the capper. I would say the back half of the album is just as strong as the front too. There's really no weak songs on this.
No.
Something like Crescent City, I think, is kind of a really good deep cut on this, and it ends with the Howling Wolf cover. I Asked for Water but got gasoline, which I feel like in the blues tradition, those kinds of turns of phrases and kind of like biting lyrics is kind of what appeals to me as well. If you're clever with words and can describe heartbreak or whatever in funny ways, that's gonna always work for me. So this is a big thumbs up for me. I really found it just a breeze to listen to.
Can I mention two things real quick too? We haven't really mentioned Side of the Road, which I feel is a really gorgeous song, both lyrically and just the way it sounds. It just, I don't know how to describe it. It just hits my ear.
I could describe it.
Almost
It
perfect
sounds
for
like
the genre.
It sounds like Africa by Toto. It's got the same chord
yeah.
progression.
But it's a
Yeah.
way better song in my opinion. Than by Toto.
But it's
Like,
right. It doesn't. It's
it
got a
moves me, and Toto never. Africa by Toto it's amazing.
I picked up on that chord progression, and I was like, that's Africa. But anyway, yeah. Go ahead. What was your second point? Yeah, I like that song too.
I hear you.
agree.
You're right.
Yeah.
Sonically, it absolutely does. Although the tone or the vibes, if you will, are
Well, it's
very,
totally
very
different instruments and production and all that. Yeah.
And the violins all over that, like Josh mentioned, which I think is a really good touch. And I want to also mention the sweet galloping bass line in Big Red Sun Blues too, which is a pretty awesome that ding, 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 like played almost perfectly throughout. You know, like almost I call it like the horse gallop. You know, bass line that is when you really get into, I guess the pocket's the wrong, but like when you really get into this genre and there's a good bass line, it usually sounds like the galloping horse is how I describe it. And it's most prominent on Big Red Sun Blues. So there's a lot of good songs on it, like a lot. I'm just, narrowing down 2, but I'd go so far as to say maybe 8 of the 12 songs I would put as like premium cuts on this. And the other 4 are not bad songs. They're just, only suffer in comparison to the strength of the other songs. So this was a real pleasure to listen to. Easy listen. And both times I listened to it, it just was enjoyable.
Yeah,
I
would definitely revisit this album for sure.
I think the other thing that I like about her and a lot of artists in this genre, not everybody, but a lot of them. I mean, I think there's like an authenticity and a genuineness to them that they just love making music. I think that if you go in making music like this, you kind of know for the most part you're not going to be making tons of money or selling tons of records, but you just like making the music and going on the road and playing in bars and and just putting your wearing your heart on your sleeve with the lyrics and stuff like that, and she's definitely, it doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of pretension here. It's just like, here I am, so I kind of like that vibe.
She's older when she's making this album too. Isn't she like close to like 38 when this album's out?
So she was born in 53.
Yeah.
So she would have been 35 when this album came out.
So like much in the same way as like a Leonard Cohen or a Bill Withers, right? We talked about their albums just sounding. It's also because it's funny because she's also kind of like a new artist while also being or like there's a whole track record of this of people that break much later. I just mentioned too, right? Bill Withers and Leonard Cohen, but we could put The National, right? They fall in that category. They broke through, I think, in their mid-30s, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And there's a maturity to the songs here that clearly stands out.
Well, it says here her first album was 79, her second album 1980, and then it was 8 years difference there. So it's kind of she was younger when she started, but when she started becoming the artist that she would be known as, she was older.
Well, and Car Wheels is like it finally gets released in '98, right? Because I know it took forever for that to be released, and so you're looking.
There's one album in between the two. There's one. There was one. She had an album in '92. Yeah. Called Sweet Old World. She always
seemed like a contemporary artist to me, right? In the 90s when I was becoming aware of her. But, to be a contemporary like artist who's 45, right, is an interesting dichotomy there, isn't it? Most of the time when you're 45, you're in the playing your hit stage. So
well, then that's when she became prolific. It was after, if you look at her discography, it's like 98, 2001, 03, 07, 08, 11, 14, 16, 17, 18. She's just pumping out the albums where in the beginning she's just, I don't know, finding her footing. But it is interesting.
By that time you're between 45 and 50, right? You're still doing new albums, but they're considered to be less than by that point in your career. But that is not the case for her. She's in like her peak in that stretch. So
and she can,
although this is pretty darn good too, so I'd say extend the peak a little further out.
Right. Yeah, and there's this continuing kind of upward trend of critical and commercial success for her after this. Like Matt said, Sweet Old World came out in '92 and got voted the 11th best album of '92 by Village Voice poll. She also became kind of a reputation for being a perfectionist and a slow worker, so kind of the reinforcement of albums taking a while. Her Car Wheels on the Gravel Road came out in '98, and that was her big breakthrough critically and commercially. It was voted the best album by the Village Voice poll. She received a Grammy for Best Contemporary Folk Album, and it was her first album to get on the Billboard 200 chart, peaking at 68 and staying for 5 months. It's also, Matt can fact check me on this, but it's 98 in the Rolling Stone list.
It's up there.
And songs from that album were featured in movies and TV, and she also appeared on SNL on February 20th, 1999. So that's kind of a big high watermark for her. She, in 2001, that album Essence featured a more down-tuned sound musically and lyrically. It moved her away from country, but won her fans in the alt music world. I have not heard that album, so I don't know what it sounds like. And then she got further success in her next album, World Without Tears, which peaked at number 18 on the Billboard charts. And then her eighth album was titled West and had more than 27 songs on it. And that fall, interestingly, she played 5 nights of shows in LA and New York City, where she performed her entire album, 5 albums, before starting with this album and proceeding. So each night she played an album completely in her discography, which I thought was interesting. And then her 9th album, Little Honey, came out in 2008 and was her first top 10 album in the Billboard chart. She's released many more albums since then, with more Grammy Awards and nominations. She suffered a stroke in November of 2020 and did not reveal to the public until May of 2021. But after several months of recovery, this summer of 2021, she toured with Jason Isbell and Bonnie Raitt. She just announced a few weeks ago that her 15th album, Stories from a Rock and Roll Heart, will come out June 30th of this year. The lead single, New York Comeback, is out now. I listened to it. It's very good. Features none other than Bruce Springsteen and Patti Scialfa from the E Street Band on it. They also appear on another song on the track Rock and Roll Heart. Angel Olsen, Margot Price, and the Replacements' Tommy Stinson will sing backup elsewhere on the album as well.
Wow, the first two totally make sense. Tommy Stinson's like, wow, that's interesting.
She's set to join Big Thief and Wilco on shows later this year, touring. She's also has a memoir coming out this month called Don't Tell Anybody the Secrets I Told You, due out April 25th. So another coincidence there. So real sweet spot for us too on the show.
Less than 2 weeks away.
Yeah. So she's still alive and kicking and doing well and touring with all those artists that kind of really are in the same, mindset and genre that she's in. So big ups to her.
It's funny because I purposely go out of my way not to look at the all music similar to and stuff like that, but it is kind of funny. It's like a who's who of who we talked about. Right. It's kind of, I think just in looking at this, there's Sheryl Crow, Roseanne Cash, Neil Young, Townes Van Zandt. It's funny. It's like all the notes, and you're like, well, we've been doing this for a while. And then influence later. It's like a who's who of acts we're going to cover in like the 2010s. So because there's a lot more people that sound like this who are on the charts, and you just mentioned a whole slew of them, Josh, that come to mind immediately that she's around. So really solid album.